Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Found my fiancée's betrayal 10 minutes before our wedding and made her pay at the altar. Clark Morrison, a celebrated architect, finds his picture-perfect life shattered when hidden truths of betrayal and greed surface just moments before saying, "I do." As secrets unravel, alliances collapse, and revenge unfolds publicly at the altar, Clark must navigate the ruins of his trust to rebuild his future. Will exposing the lies set him free, or will the fallout leave him forever haunted? Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. Chapter 1. The Perfect Wedding. The morning sun cast golden ribbons through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Plaza Hotel's bridal suite, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny diamonds in the air. Clark Morrison stood before the antique mirror, adjusting his charcoal gray bow tie for the third time. His hands, usually steady when drafting architectural blueprints, trembled slightly as he smoothed down his tuxedo lapels. "You're gonna wear out that tie before you even say, 'I do.'" Michael Chen laughed from the velvet armchair, his feet propped up on an ottoman that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Relax, buddy. You've been planning this day for months." Clark forced a smile, but his reflection betrayed the anxiety churning in his stomach. 5 years. 5 perfect years with Megan, and now, on the precipice of forever, something felt off, like a blueprint with measurements that didn't quite add up. "Just want everything to be perfect," Clark murmured, turning away from the mirror. The suite's opulent decor, all cream and gold with touches of powder blue, suddenly felt suffocating. Through the window, Manhattan stretched out below, a concrete jungle bathed in October sunshine. Somewhere in this city, Megan was getting ready too, probably surrounded by her bridesmaids, laughing that infectious laugh that had first caught his attention at that gallery opening in Soho. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Faith, his younger sister, poked her head through the door, her auburn hair pinned up in an elaborate style that made her look older than her 30 years. "Special delivery for the groom," she announced, holding up a manila envelope. "Who delivers mail on a Saturday morning?" Michael asked, sitting up straighter. Faith shrugged, her seafoam green bridesmaid dress rustling as she crossed the room. "Doorman said some guy dropped it off. Insisted it had to reach you before the ceremony." She handed Clark the envelope, her hazel eyes so like his own, narrowing with concern. "You okay? You look pale." Clark took the envelope, his name written across it in block letters. No return address. The paper felt heavy in his hands, weighted with possibility. "Yeah, I'm fine. Probably just another congratulations card from one of Mom's church friends." But as Faith left and Michael returned to scrolling through his phone, Clark's fingers traced the sealed edge. His architect's mind, trained to spot flaws and inconsistencies, screamed that this was wrong. Wedding gifts came wrapped in silver paper and satin bows, not anonymous manila envelopes. He set it aside on the mahogany desk, next to his cufflinks, a gift from Megan's parents. Later. He'd deal with it later. His phone buzzed, a text from Megan. "Can't wait to marry you, baby. Just a few more hours until forever." Clark smiled despite his unease, typing back, "Forever sounds perfect, I love you." But as he slipped the phone into his pocket, his eyes kept drifting to that envelope. Michael was rambling about the bachelor party, about how Clark had been too drunk to remember karaoke, but the words faded to white noise. Outside, a siren wailed the city's perpetual soundtrack. Clark walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cool glass. Below, yellow cabs crawled through the streets like beetles, and somewhere among them, Miles Bradshaw was probably making his way to the hotel. Miles, with his perfect teeth and CEO swagger, who'd hired Megan 3 years ago and turned her into one of Manhattan's most sought-after marketing executives. Miles, who always stood a little too close at company parties, whose compliments to Megan always lasted a beat too long. "Earth to Clark," Michael called out. "You're really out of it today, man." Clark turned, forcing himself back to the present. "Sorry, just wedding jitters, I guess." Michael stood, straightening his own tux. "Look, I've known you since freshman year at Columbia. You've never been more sure about anything in your life than you are about Megan. Whatever's got you spooked, forget it. Today's about you two. The hotel room's landline rang, startling them both. Clark answered, "Hello? Mr. Morrison? This is the front desk. Your bride asked me to inform you she's running slightly behind schedule. Hair emergency," she said. The concierge's voice was apologetic but amused. "Thanks for letting me know." Clark hung up, a genuine smile finally breaking through. Hair emergency. So typically Megan perfectionist to the core. As Michael excused himself to check on the groomsmen, Clark found himself alone with that damned envelope. He picked it up, weighing it in his hands. Inside, something solid shifted, not papers. His architect's hands, trained to build and create, trembled as they tore open the seal. A black USB drive tumbled onto the desk, along with a single sheet of paper. 4 words in the same block letters. "You deserve the truth." Clark's blood turned to ice water in his veins. He picked up the USB, turning it over. No markings, no label. Just a small device that suddenly felt heavier than the cornerstones of the skyscrapers he designed. His laptop sat closed on the bedside table. All he had to do was open it, insert the drive, and learn whatever truth someone felt he deserved. But did he want to know? On his wedding day? The suite door burst open. "Showtime in 20, brother," Faith announced, David Chen, Megan's older brother, at her side. David's usually confident demeanor seemed shaky, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for exits. "Everything all right, David?" Clark asked, slipping the USB into his pocket. Yeah, just wedding day nerves. You know how it is." David's laugh rang hollow. "Megan's almost ready. She looks beautiful, Clark. You're a lucky man." Something in David's tone made Clark's unease crystallize into dread. But Faith was already herding them toward the door, chattering about the photographer and the timeline and how the flowers in the ballroom were absolutely perfect. As they made their way through the plaza's ornate corridors, Clark's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out to find another text from Megan, but the words made his steps falter. "Don't worry, honey. After tonight, everything will be just like we planned." An innocent message. Wedding day excitement. But why did it feel like a goodbye? The USB drive burned in his pocket as they descended the grand staircase. 300 guests waited in the palm court, expecting to witness a fairy tale, and Clark Morrison, architect of dreams and builder of futures, suddenly wondered if he'd constructed his entire life on a foundation of lies. Chapter 2. The USB Mystery. The groomsmen's suite was a chaos of cologne and nervous energy. Clark slipped away from the backslapping and crude jokes, locking himself in the marble bathroom. His reflection stared back from the gilt-framed mirror, a successful Manhattan architect about to marry the woman of his dreams. So why did he look like a man approaching the gallows? The USB drive sat cold against his palm. 1 click, that's all it would take. "Clark? You fall in?" Michael's voice carried through the door. "Photographer wants the groomsmen in 5. "Be right out," Clark called back, his voice steadier than his hands. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. 11:47 a.m. The ceremony started at noon. 13 minutes to decide whether ignorance truly was bliss. His phone rang Megan's ringtone, "Fly Me to the Moon," their song from that first night in Soho. He almost dropped the device in his haste to answer. "Hey, beautiful. How's that hair emergency?" A pause. Then her voice, but different somehow. Strained. "Clark, I can't wait to see you, to explain everything." "Explain what?" The bathroom suddenly felt airless. "What? No, nothing. I meant, explain how much you mean to me. In my vows." Her laugh tinkled like broken glass. "I'm just emotional. Jessica keeps trying to fix my mascara, but I can't stop crying. Happy tears, you know?" In the background, Clark heard a man's voice, low, urgent. "Is that David?" he asked. "Yeah, he's checking on me, being the protective big brother." Another pause. "Clark? Whatever happens today, know that I loved you, love you, present tense, always." The line went dead. Clark stared at the phone, her words echoing. Whatever happens today. His architect's mind built 1,000 terrible structures from those 3 words, each more devastating than the last. The USB drive seemed to pulse in his hand. No more time for cowardice. He pulled out his laptop from his messenger bag. He always carried it, even on his wedding day, because you never knew when inspiration might strike. The startup sound seemed unnaturally loud in the bathroom silence. His fingers trembled as he inserted the drive. A single folder appeared. The Truth About Megan. Inside, 3 files, a video, an audio recording, a PDF. Clark clicked the video first. The timestamp showed 3 months ago, July 15th, 2015. Security footage, grainy but clear enough. The Waldorf Astoria's recognizable lobby. And there, Megan, in that red dress he'd bought her for her birthday, walking hand in hand with Miles Bradshaw toward the elevators. Miles leaned down, whispered something in her ear. She threw her head back, laughing, then pulled him in for a kiss that was definitely not professional. Clark's world tilted. He gripped the marble countertop, forcing himself to breathe. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. The audio file was dated last week. Megan's voice, clear as day. "Jessica, I'm telling you, after tomorrow night, I'll be set for life. Clark's trust fund alone is worth $8 million. Add in his company assets. The prenup Miles had his lawyer draw up is ironclad. I just have to make it through the ceremony. Play the loving wife for a few months, then." A laugh, cruel and unfamiliar. "Then Miles and I can stop sneaking around. God, Clark's so trusting. He has no idea I've been moving money from our joint accounts. Small amounts, nothing he'd notice. But it adds up." Jessica's voice responded, "You sure Miles will leave his wife?" "Please. Sarah's already suspicious. That's why we have to be careful. But after I'm married to Clark, who's going to suspect the new bride of cheating? It's perfect." Clark's legs gave out. He slumped against the wall, laptop balanced on his knees. One more file. The PDF opened to reveal bank statements, their joint account, showing regular transfers to an account in Megan's name only. $500 here, $750 there. Over the past year, nearly $50,000 had disappeared in dribs and drabs. But the final page made his blood run cold. A prenuptial agreement with his forged signature, dated a month ago. Terms that would give Megan everything in case of divorce, including intellectual property rights to his architectural designs, specifically the Morrison Center project, his revolutionary sustainable skyscraper design that 3 firms were bidding on, worth millions if he won the contract. A violent knock shook the door. "Clark! Jesus, man, we need to go!" Michael sounded panicked. Clark closed the laptop, hands moving on autopilot. He slipped the USB back in his pocket and unlocked the door. Michael's face went from annoyed to concerned in a heartbeat. "Holy shit, you look like death. What's wrong?" "I need you to do something for me," Clark said, his voice eerily calm. "Call Robert Mitchell." "Your lawyer? Now? Clark, the ceremony, now." Clark gripped his best friend's shoulders. "Tell him to come to the hotel immediately. Tell him. Tell him to bring his recorder." Michael's eyes widened. "Clark, what's going on?" "I've got 12 minutes to save my life," Clark said, pushing past him into the suite. The other groomsmen had already left for the ballroom. Good. He needed to think. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The woman in the kitchen uniform by the service elevator has an envelope for you. More evidence. A friend." Clark looked at Michael. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Michael nodded slowly. "Always, brother. What do you need?" "Stall the ceremony. I don't care how. Technical difficulties with the sound system, missing rings, anything. Buy me 20 minutes. "Clark. Please." The word came out cracked, desperate. Michael pulled out his phone. "Consider it done. But you better tell me what the hell is happening." Clark was already moving toward the door. "I just found out the woman I'm about to marry has been playing me for a fool, and in approximately 10 minutes I'm going to return the favor." He strode through the plaza's hallways, each step more certain than the last. Hotel staff bustled past, carrying champagne and flowers, preparing for a celebration that would never happen. At least, not the one they expected. The service elevator area was deserted except for a woman in kitchen whites, nervously clutching a manila envelope. She looked up as Clark approached, relief flooding her features. "Mr. Morrison? This is from Sarah Bradshaw. She said you'd understand." Miles's wife. Of course. Clark took the envelope, heavier than the first. "Thank you. Tell Sarah. Tell her she won't have to share him anymore after today. The woman nodded and disappeared into the elevator. Clark tore open the envelope, finding more photos, more evidence. Receipts from romantic dinners charged to Miles's company card, hotel bookings, and photos, God, so many photos. Megan and Miles at charity galas, their bodies pressed too close. At company retreats, sneaking kisses when they thought no one was looking. But the last item stopped his heart. A pregnancy test. Positive. With a sticky note in Megan's handwriting. We did it, baby. Now I just need to make sure Clark thinks it's his. The paper crumpled in Clark's fist. Not just betrayal. Not just theft. But this. This was evil in its purest form. His phone rang. Faith, probably wondering where the hell he was. But when he looked at the screen, it was Thomas, his lawyer. Clark, Michael called me. I'm in the lobby. What's this about? Conference room, second floor, Clark said. Bring your recorder and whatever paperwork you need to freeze joint assets. We have exactly 8 minutes to prevent the biggest mistake of my life. He ended the call and straightened his bow tie in the hallway mirror. The man staring back wasn't the nervous groom from an hour ago. This was someone else, someone harder, someone who built skyscrapers that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes. Time to test if he could withstand betrayal. 7 minutes until noon. 7 minutes to architect the perfect revenge. Chapter 3. Decision at the Crossroads. The plaza's second-floor conference room smelled of leather and old money. Thomas Wu burst through the door, briefcase in hand, his usually immaculate suit slightly disheveled from his rush to the hotel. Behind him, Robert Mitchell, the private investigator Michael had hired for the bachelor party as a joke, looked grim. Jesus, Clark, what's happening? Thomas set his briefcase on the mahogany table. Michael said something about freezing assets? Clark spread the evidence across the table like tarot cards predicting doom. How fast can you lock down my accounts? Thomas picked up the forged prenup, his face darkening. Clark, this is fraud. Criminal fraud. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I can freeze everything in 5 minutes. But Clark, do it. Clark turned to Robert. You knew, didn't you? That's why you're here. The investigator, a former NYPD detective with sad eyes, nodded slowly. Michael hired me as a gag gift, but I always run background checks. It's habit. I found some irregularities in Megan's history. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon, but then Sarah Bradshaw contacted me this morning. You sent the USB. Sarah did. I just made sure it reached you. Robert pulled out a tablet. There's more, Clark. Megan O'Brien doesn't exist before 2010. Her social security number belonged to a woman who died in 2009. Your fiancé is a con artist. The words tasted like ash. How long has Sarah known? 3 weeks. She hired me to investigate her husband's late nights. Found more than she bargained for. Robert swiped through photos on his tablet. Megan and Miles have been planning this for 2 years. You weren't their first mark, just their biggest. Clark's phone exploded with texts. Faith. Where are you? Michael. Sound system mysteriously crashed. You've got maybe 10 more minutes. And Megan. Clark, please, where are you? I need to see you before we do this. How much did she take? Clark asked Thomas, who was frantically working on his laptop. $47,000 from joint accounts. But Clark, if this prenup had gone through... Thomas looked up, face pale. The Morrison Center designs alone are worth $12 million. Your entire portfolio would be hers. Clark laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. God, I shared everything with her. Every design, every innovation. Pillow talk about sustainable architecture turns out to be corporate espionage. The door flew open. David stood there, sweat beading on his forehead. Clark, thank God. You need to know something about my sister. That she's a fraud? Already figured that out, David. Clark watched the man's face crumble. Question is, how long have you known? David slumped against the doorframe. 6 months. I found out she was. God, I tried to make her stop. Told her she was better than this. But she said she was in too deep, that Miles had something on her. She said after today she'd be free of him. Free of him? Robert interjected. She's planning to marry him after she divorces Clark. What? No, that's... David's face went from confused to horrified. Oh my God, she played me too. Said Miles was blackmailing her, that marrying you was the only way to get enough money to pay him off and disappear. Clark felt a moment of pity for David, then crushed it. Pity was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not today. Thomas closed his laptop. Done. All accounts frozen. I've also filed an emergency injunction protecting your intellectual property. Any attempt to access or transfer your assets will trigger immediate alerts to law enforcement. Good. Clark stood, straightening his tuxedo. Gentlemen, in approximately 5 minutes, I'm going to walk into that ballroom. What happens next will either be the worst mistake of my life or the best performance. I need you all to be ready. Ready for what? David asked. Clark pulled out the USB drive, holding it up to the light. The wedding's off. But the show? The show must go on. His phone rang. Faith again. This time he answered. Clark Morrison, I swear to God, if you leave me standing at this altar. Faith, listen carefully. In about 3 minutes, I need you to faint. What? Trust me. When I give the signal, you faint. Make it dramatic. Can you do that? A pause. Then his sister's voice, steady and sure. You're my brother. I'd fight dragons for you. Fake fainting is child's play. Clark smiled, the first genuine expression he'd managed in an hour. I love you too, sis. Now, positions everyone. He looked around the room at his assembled team. Thomas, already drafting legal documents. Robert, preparing his evidence files. Even David, who despite everything seemed ready to stand against his own sister. Michael? Clark said into his phone as he headed for the door. Yeah, buddy. Get the AV guy to patch my phone into the sound system. Tell him there's 500 in it for him if he can do it in 2 minutes. Clark, what are you... Justice, Michael. I'm about to serve justice. Wedding cake optional. Clark strode toward the elevator, each step measured and deliberate. The plaza's opulent decor blurred past all gilt and marble, and centuries of tradition about to witness something unprecedented. As the elevator descended, he thought about the Clark from this morning, anxiously adjusting his bow tie, worried about making Megan happy. That man was dead. The one riding down to face 300 guests and a fraudulent bride. This was someone reborn in fury and forged in betrayal. The ballroom doors loomed ahead, closed but not locked. Behind them, the murmur of confused guests, wondering about the delay. The wedding march hadn't played yet. Michael had done his job well. Clark paused, hand on the door handle. Inside waited Megan in her $50,000 dress, probably wondering if her mark had grown a spine. Miles, sitting with the other executives, no doubt mentally spending Clark's money. 300 witnesses to what should have been the happiest day of his life. His phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number again. Your architect's eye for detail was always your strength. Use it now. Build something from these ruins. S.B. Sarah Bradshaw. A woman scorned, reaching out to a man about to be scorned. There was poetry in that. Clark pushed open the ballroom doors. The conversation died instantly, 300 heads turning toward him. At the altar, Megan stood in pristine white Vera Wang, her face a masterwork of false concern melting into relief. Clark! She started toward him, but he held up a hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Clark announced, his voice carrying across the Palm Court's soaring space. Thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion. He walked down the aisle, each step measured, architectural, like placing blocks for a foundation. Megan's smile began to falter as she registered something in his expression. Behind her, Jessica clutched her bridesmaid bouquet like a weapon. Miles sat in the third row, his $1,000 smile dimming as Clark's eyes found his. Before we begin, Clark continued, now standing at the altar, I have something to share, a gift, you might say, from a friend. He pulled out his phone, fingers steady as granite now. You see, this morning I received a delivery, a truth too big to ignore, and I believe, no, I know, that truth should be shared with family. The AV system crackled to life. Michael had come through. Megan, Clark said, looking directly into her jade eyes he'd once compared to spring forests, but now saw as swamp water. Would you like to tell them, or should I? The blood drained from her face, leaving her makeup stark against pale skin. Clark, I don't know what you're... No? He held up his phone. Then let's let you tell them yourself. He hit play. Chapter 4. The Bomb at the Altar. Megan's recorded voice filled the Palm Court ballroom with crystalline clarity. Clark's so trusting. He has no idea I've been moving money from our joint accounts. Small amounts, nothing he'd notice, but it adds up. 300 guests sat frozen. Champagne flutes halfway to lips. Canapes turning to ash in their mouths. The October sunlight streaming through the plaza's windows seemed to dim, as if the building itself recoiled from the betrayal echoing off its walls. "Clark, please!" Megan reached for him, her designer heels clicking against the marble as she stumbled forward. The cathedral-length veil, hand sewn with pearls, tangled around her feet. Clark stepped back, maintaining the distance between them like an architect, calculating load-bearing walls. "Wait, there's more." Jessica's voice joined Megan's on the recording. "You sure Miles will leave his wife?" In the third row, Sarah Bradshaw stood slowly, her Chanel suit impeccable, her dignity intact despite the tears cutting channels through her foundation. Miles had gone the color of spoiled milk, his CEO swagger evaporating like morning mist. "Turn it off!" Megan's voice cracked, no longer the composed marketing executive, but something raw and desperate. "Clark, please, I can explain." "Explain?" Clark pulled out the pregnancy test, holding it high enough for the front rows to see. "Explain how you were going to pass off another man's child as mine? Explain the $47,000 you stole? Or maybe explain this?" He produced the forged prenup, and Thomas Wu stood from his position in the fifth row. "That document constitutes felony fraud. I've already notified the authorities." The ballroom erupted. Guests turned to each other, voices rising in shocked whispers that built to a roar. Photographers hired to capture joy now documented destruction, their cameras clicking like typewriter keys composing tomorrow's scandal sheets. "You don't understand." Megan spun toward Miles, her bouquet of white roses and baby's breath scattering petals like snow. Tell them how you forced me." "Forced you?" Miles laughed, ugly and sharp. "Baby, you came up with this plan. I just provided the capital." Sarah Bradshaw's palm connected with her husband's face with a crack that silenced the room. 23 years, she said, voice steady despite the tears. 23 years I gave you, built your company with you, raised your children. And for what? For her?" She turned to Megan with the kind of contempt that could freeze hell. "She's not even that good a con artist. Megan O'Brien died in 2009. Did you even bother to check if her family had money before you stole her identity?" David pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of anguish. "Meggie, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't. God, I defended you. When Mom and Dad said something felt off, I defended you." Megan's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. Mascara ran in black rivers down her cheeks, her red lipstick smeared like blood. "I was going to pay it all back. After the Morrison Center project sold, I was going to... Going to what?" Clark's voice cut through her excuses like a scalpel. "Leave me broken while you ran off to the Bahamas?" "Oh, yes. I found those plane tickets, too." He turned to address the room, the architect presenting his final blueprint. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, you came here expecting to witness a union. Instead, you're seeing the truth. The woman I thought I loved doesn't exist. She's a fiction, built on stolen identity and elaborate lies." Father McKenna, the elderly priest who'd counseled them through premarital classes, crossed himself. "My child," he said to Megan, "confession might save your soul, but I fear your freedom is forfeit." As if on cue, 2 NYPD officers entered the ballroom. Detective Rodriguez had worked fast. "No." Megan lunged for Clark, her manicured nails catching his sleeve. "I loved you! Despite everything, I loved you! You have to believe, love." Clark gently but firmly removed her hand. "You don't destroy someone you love. You don't steal from them, lie to them, plan to abandon them. That's not love, Megan, or whatever your real name is. That's just greed wearing a wedding dress." The officers approached, one pulling out handcuffs. The wedding photographer, sensing the shot of a lifetime, raised his camera. "Miles Bradshaw," Detective Rodriguez announced, Megan O'Brien, or whatever alias you're currently using, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." "This is your fault!" Megan screamed at Sarah as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, the sound somehow louder than the wedding bells that would never ring. "If you'd kept your husband satisfied—" "My fault?" Sarah laughed, brittle as winter branches. "Honey, I'm not the one who built a life on lies. I'm just the woman who made sure you couldn't build it any higher." As the officers led Megan away, her designer dress dragging across the floor like surrender flags, she turned back one last time. "Clark!" But Clark had already turned away, facing the shell-shocked congregation. "I apologize for the deception in bringing you all here. The reception is paid for. Please, enjoy the champagne and food. Consider it a celebration of truth over treachery." Michael appeared at his elbow, steady as always. "You okay, brother?" "No," Clark admitted, watching Miles being escorted out in handcuffs, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the marble. "But I will be." Faith materialized on his other side, slipping her hand into his. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do." "Or the stupidest," Clark said, finally allowing exhaustion to creep into his voice. "No," said a woman's voice behind them. Sarah Bradshaw stood there, mascara smudged but unbroken. "It was justice. Thank you, Clark, for having the courage I didn't have for years." She walked away, her heels clicking with newfound purpose. Around them, the wedding guests milled about, unsure whether to leave or stay. Some headed for the bar, nothing like premium scotch to wash down scandal. David approached hesitantly. "Clark, I'm sorry. I should have told you when I found out. She's my sister. Was my sister. I don't even know anymore." Clark studied the man, former groomsman, former future brother-in-law, current broken soul. "She played us both, David. The only difference is, I had proof." The ballroom, decorated in white and gold for a celebration of love, now looked like a beautiful morgue. Ice sculptures melted slowly, weeping crystal tears. The 5-tier wedding cake stood untouched, its sugar flowers mocking the real ones scattered across the floor. "What now?" Faith asked softly. Clark loosened his bow tie, that same tie he'd fussed with a lifetime ago this morning. Now I rebuild. That's what architects do. When a structure fails, we learn why. We clear the rubble. And we build something better." He looked up at the plaza's ornate ceiling, all gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. Somewhere above, the honeymoon suite waited, champagne on ice, rose petals on Egyptian cotton sheets, a stage set for a play that would never open. "Mr. Morrison?" The hotel manager appeared, wringing his hands. "About the reception." "Is the band here?" Clark asked suddenly. "Yes, sir, but given the circumstances." "Tell them to play. Something upbeat. If we're going to have 300 witnesses to the worst day of my life, we might as well give them a show they'll never forget." As the band struck up ironically, "Love is an open door," Clark Morrison stood in the ruins of his wedding, surrounded by the people who truly loved him. The woman he'd planned to marry was heading to a holding cell. The future he'd carefully designed had crumbled like a condemned building, but he was still standing, and in the end, that was enough. The October sun continued its arc across the Manhattan sky, indifferent to human drama. Tomorrow, the gossip pages would feast on the Morrison-O'Brien wedding scandal. Miles's company stock would plummet. Sarah Bradshaw would file for divorce and take half of everything. But right now, in the palm court of the Plaza Hotel, Clark Morrison raised a glass of champagne, might as well not let the Dom Perignon go to waste, and toasted the only thing worth celebrating. "To the truth," he said, "however much it hurts, it's still better than the prettiest lie." Faith clinked her glass against his. Michael did the same. Even David, tears streaming down his face, raised his glass. And somewhere in the back of the ballroom, the wedding photographer captured the moment. A groom without a bride, surrounded by broken flowers and shattered dreams, somehow managing to smile. It wasn't the photo Megan had dreamed of for her Instagram, but it was the one that told the truth. And sometimes, Clark thought as he drained his champagne, that's all that matters. Chapter 5. 48 hours of chaos. The New York Post's headline screamed across every newsstand in Manhattan. Plaza wedding turns prison walk, bride arrested at own altar. Below it, a photo of Meghan in handcuffs, her Vera Wang dress trailing behind her like a surrender flag, had already gone viral. The timestamp showed 6:47 a.m. Monday morning, less than 48 hours since the wedding that wasn't. Clark stood at his apartment window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the city wake up to his personal nightmare turned public spectacle. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since Saturday afternoon. Reporters, distant relatives, clients wondering if their architect was stable enough to continue their projects. He'd turned it off around midnight, but the silence felt worse than the noise. "You need to eat something," Faith said from behind him, setting a plate of scrambled eggs on the kitchen counter. She'd refused to leave him alone, camping out on his couch like they were kids again, protecting him from monsters. Except now the monsters had names and prenuptial agreements. "I'm not hungry." Clark's reflection in the window looked hollow, a ghost of the man who'd stood at that altar with righteous fury. In the aftermath, only exhaustion remained. "Tough. Eat anyway." Faith's tone brooked no argument. "Michael called. Says there's something you need to see." Before Clark could respond, a key turned in the lock. Only 3 people had keys to his apartment. Faith was here. Meghan was in custody, which left "Jesus Christ, Clark, you look like death warmed over." Michael burst in, laptop under his arm, face grim. "We've got a problem. Several, actually." He set up the laptop on the coffee table, fingers flying over the keys. "First, the good news. Thomas locked down your assets tight. Not a penny moved since Saturday, but Clark." Michael turned the screen toward him. "This is bad." TMZ's website filled the screen. Exclusive, wedding crasher grooms dark past sources say violence history. Below, a grainy photo of Clark from college, a black eye from a boxing match twisted into something sinister by creative captioning. "What sources?" Clark's voice came out flat, emotionless. The shock had burned through his emotional reserves, leaving only tired acceptance. "That's where it gets interesting." Michael pulled up another tab. "Jessica Patterson was released on bail yesterday. Guess who paid?" Faith leaned over, reading the court documents. "Harold Patterson. Who's, oh God, Patterson Industries?" "Meghan's friend comes from old money. Really old, really vindictive money." Michael's jaw tightened. "And it gets worse. Look at this." A video played security footage from Clark's parking garage, time-stamped Friday night. It showed Clark entering, then cut to him stumbling out, seemingly drunk, being helped by a figure whose face was conveniently obscured. "I wasn't drunk Friday night," Clark said slowly. "I was home, going over the Morrison Center presentations. We know that, but whoever edited this is good. Really good." Michael closed the laptop. "Thomas thinks they're building a case, make you look unstable, violent, paint Meghan as the victim of an abusive relationship who just snapped." Clark's phone, still off, sat on the counter like a dead thing. He powered it on, immediately assaulted by notification after notification. Voicemails, texts, emails. One name made him freeze. "Miles left me a voicemail," he said, thumb hovering over the play button. "Don't," Faith started. But Clark had already pressed play. Miles's voice filled the kitchen, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as toxic. "Clark, buddy, what a mess, right? Listen, we both know this has gotten out of hand. I've got some information you might find interesting about your little triumph. Meet me at the Starbucks on 47th. Come alone, or the next headline will make yesterday's look like a love letter." The message ended. Clark set the phone down carefully, the way you'd handle a live grenade. "It's a trap," Michael said immediately. "He's out on bail, desperate. This screams setup." "Of course it's a trap." Clark's laugh held no humor. "Question is, what's he really after?" Faith grabbed his arm as he moved toward his jacket. "You're not seriously considering going?" "I need answers, Faith, like why a simple marketing executive was connected to—" Clark paused, remembering something from the arrest. "Rodriguez mentioned checking Meghan for outstanding warrants. Why would he do that unless—" The apartment door exploded inward. 3 men in black jackets stormed in, moving with practiced efficiency. Not cops, their movements were too smooth, too coordinated. Private security. Expensive private security. "Mr. Morrison," the lead man said, his accent placing him somewhere in Eastern Europe. "Mr. Petrov would like a word." Michael stepped forward. "Who the hell is?" The man's fist connected with Michael's stomach, dropping him to his knees. Faith screamed, rushing to help him. "Please," the man continued, as if he hadn't just assaulted someone. "No more dramatics. You've caused enough trouble for one weekend." Clark positioned himself between the men and his sister. "I don't know any Petrov." "No? Then perhaps you know his son better." The man smiled, gold teeth glinting. "Though you probably knew him as Miles Bradshaw. Mr. Petrov is. Disappointed in how you handled his son's business arrangement." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Miles wasn't just some corrupt CEO, he was mob royalty, playing at legitimate business while Daddy ran the real empire. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Clark said, calculating distances to weapons. Kitchen knives too far. Baseball bat in the closet impossible to reach. "Oh, but you are." The man pulled out a phone showing a video feed. David, Megan's brother, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. "Your former brother-in-law has been our guest since yesterday. Every hour you delay, he loses a finger. We're already at—" He checked an expensive watch. 2 hours overdue." On screen, someone approached David with bolt cutters. "Stop!" Clark stepped forward. "I'll come. Just don't hurt him." "Clark, no," Faith whispered, but he was already moving, grabbing his jacket. "Call Thomas," he told his sister quietly. "Tell him everything. And Michael?" He helped his friend stand. "That wedding photographer you hired? The one who caught everything? Make sure those photos get somewhere safe." The lead man gestured toward the door. "Smart choice, Mr. Morrison. Oh, and leave your phone. We wouldn't want any interruptions." Clark dropped his phone on the counter, catching Faith's terrified eyes one last time. "It's okay," he lied. "I build things to last, remember? Even myself." As they escorted him out, Clark's mind raced. 48 hours ago, his biggest concern was his bow tie. Now he was walking into the den of the Russian mob, with nothing but his wits and the faint hope that somewhere in this city, the FBI was actually doing their job. The elevator descended in silence, carrying him down into whatever hell Viktor Petrov had prepared. Outside, Manhattan continued its relentless pace, unaware that one of its architects was about to discover just how deep the foundations of corruption really went. In the apartment above, Faith held Michael as he caught his breath, both of them staring at Clark's abandoned phone. It buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "The real game begins now. VP." Chapter 6. Web of Lies. The warehouse in Red Hook smelled of motor oil and fear. Clark's eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, revealing a space that seemed torn from a crime movie's location scout folder. Concrete floors stained with substances he didn't want to identify, chains hanging from rafters like industrial wind chimes, and in the center, David slumped in a metal chair. "David?" Clark started forward, but one of Petrov's men grabbed his shoulder. "First we talk," the gravelly voice came from the shadows. Viktor Petrov stepped into the light, and Clark understood where Miles got his height and cruel eyes. But where Miles played at being civilized, his father wore brutality like a custom suit. "Mr. Morrison, the architect who builds dreams." Petrov circled him slowly, predator sizing up prey. "You know what I build? Empires. Generation after generation, until you decided to play hero." "Your son was stealing from me," Clark said, keeping his voice steady despite the armed men flanking him. "I defended myself." "Stealing?" Petrov laughed, the sound like grinding glass. "Boy, you don't understand anything. This was business. Clean, simple, profitable. Megan takes your money, your designs. Miles launders it through his company. Everyone wins. Except me." "You?" Petrov stepped closer, breath reeking of cigarettes and violence. "You were selected, vetted, approved. Do you know how many architects we considered? But you—" He tapped Clark's temple with one gnarled finger. "You had the perfect combination. Talent, money, and stupidity." David groaned from his chair, lifting his head. Both eyes were blackened, his right hand wrapped in bloody bandages. "Clark, shouldn't have come." "Touching," Petrov said. Family loyalty. Speaking of which, he snapped his fingers. One of his men brought over a tablet showing security footage. Your sister Faith, pretty girl, lives alone at 425 East 78th Street, apartment 12B, jogs every morning through Central Park. Very predictable route. Clark's blood turned to ice. If you touch her, then you'll what? Call the police? The FBI? Petrov smiled. Let me show you something. He gestured to another man, who wheeled in a bulletin board covered in photos, documents, string connecting various points like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But this was real. Too real. Detective Rodriguez? My nephew. The judge who'll hear Megan's case? Poker buddy for 20 years? That FBI agent Linda who's been sniffing around? She thinks she's undercover. Petrov tapped a photo of Linda. We've been feeding her just enough truth to keep her bosses happy. Clark stared at the board, his architect's mind processing the connections. It was elegantly constructed, this web of corruption, beautiful in its complexity, terrifying in its reach. But you, Petrov continued, you had to make it public, had to have your moment of drama. Do you know what that cost me? Your son's freedom? The backhand came without warning, snapping Clark's head to the side. He tasted copper, felt warmth trickle down his chin. My son was weak, Petrov spat. Fell for that Megan when he was supposed to use her, let emotions cloud business. But he was still my blood. And now? He pulled out a phone showing a news alert. Now he's dead. Clark blinked, certain he'd misheard. What? Suicide, they're calling it. Found him in his cell this morning, bedsheet around his neck. Petrov's eyes were flat, emotionless. We both know that's not true. Someone wanted him quiet. Someone who knew he'd flip for a deal. I didn't. Of course not. You were too busy playing the victim. Petrov pocketed the phone. No, this was someone cleaning house. Someone who stands to gain from chaos. A new voice cut through the warehouse. That would be me. Everyone turned. Jessica Patterson stood in the doorway, no longer the terrified bridesmaid, but something harder, more dangerous. Behind her, 4 men in tactical gear fanned out, weapons trained on Petrov's crew. Jessica? Clark couldn't process this new development. What? Jessica Patterson died 3 years ago, she said, moving into the warehouse with practiced ease. Agent Sarah Volkov, DEA. Though I do appreciate you all gathering in one place. Makes my job easier. Petrov's men reached for weapons, but the tactical team was faster. Nobody moves, Sarah commanded. We've got snipers on the adjacent buildings. This warehouse is surrounded. DEA? Petrov laughed, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. You have no jurisdiction. When you're moving that much heroin through legitimate businesses, we have all the jurisdiction we need. Sarah pulled out her badge. Miles was sloppy. All those shell companies, the money laundering through tech startups. We've been building this case for 3 years. Clark's head spun. Then Megan was exactly what she seemed, a con artist who stumbled into something bigger. Sarah's smile was sharp. Honestly, her greed almost ruined our entire operation. We were days away from moving when you decided to have your theatrical wedding finale. So why didn't you stop it? Because you gave us something better. Public attention, media scrutiny. Petrov here had to scramble, make mistakes. She gestured to the bulletin board. Like gathering all his conspirators' information in one convenient location. Thank you for that, by the way. Petrov snarled something in Russian. Sarah responded in kind, her accent flawless. Here's what's going to happen, she continued in English. Mr. Petrov, you're under arrest. Your men can surrender or die. Their choice. Mr. Morrison, Mr. Chen, you're coming with us. Protective custody until we sort this mess. You think it's that simple? Petrov asked. You think taking me down stops anything? I'm one man in an ocean. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Petrov looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then at Sarah's smoking weapon. He was reaching for a gun, she said calmly, despite Petrov's empty hands. Everyone saw it, right? Her team nodded in unison. Clark felt bile rise in his throat. You just executed him. I ended a threat, Sarah corrected. Would you prefer he lived to send people after your sister? After you? Men like Petrov don't stay in prison. They have too much money, too many connections. She was right. Clark hated that she was right. Now, Sarah continued as her team zip-tied Petrov's men, let's get you both medical attention. We have a lot to discuss about your testimony. Testimony? Clark helped David stand, his former almost brother-in-law leaning heavily on him. For what trial? You just killed the main defendant. Petrov was a symptom, not the disease. Sarah pulled out a tablet, showing a complex organizational chart. His operation extends through half of Manhattan's business district. Real estate, tech companies, investment firms. Your architectural designs, Mr. Morrison, they weren't just for money. They were blueprints for buildings specifically designed to facilitate trafficking. Clark stared at his own designs on the screen, noting modifications he hadn't made. Hidden spaces, unusual ventilation systems, structural elements that made no sense unless... Smuggling compartments, he breathed. They turned my buildings into distribution centers, elegant, efficient, invisible. Sarah's respect seemed genuine. You're quite talented. It's why they chose you. How long? David asked, voice rough from screaming. How long was Megan involved? Sarah checked her files. Our records show first contact 2 years ago. She was already running cons, but small time. Miles recruited her, trained her, aimed her at Mr. Morrison. The pregnancy was real, by the way. DNA test confirms Miles was the father. Something twisted in Clark's chest. Despite everything, that detail hurt more than it should. What happens now? He asked. Now? Now we disappear you both until trials conclude. New identities if necessary. Witness protection has nice architects, Mr. Morrison. You could rebuild somewhere else. And if I refuse? Sarah gestured at Petrov's cooling body. Then you probably join him. His organization won't forgive what happened here. Neither will the people above him. Above him? David laughed bitterly. How high does this go? Higher than you want to know. Sarah's team began processing the scene, photographing everything. We've got judges, politicians, police commissioners. Your wedding drama knocked over the first domino. Question is whether you want to be around when the rest fall. Clark looked at the warehouse around him. 48 hours ago, he'd been a successful architect with a bright future. Now he was a witness to execution, target of organized crime, pawn in games he didn't understand. I want to call my sister, he said finally. Already done. She and Mr. Chen are being relocated as we speak. Sarah handed him a burner phone. One call. Make it count. Clark dialed, hands shaking. Faith answered on the first ring. Clark? Oh God, are you... I'm okay, he lied. Faith, I need you to trust some people. They're going to keep you safe. What's happening? These agents showed up and... Just trust them. Trust me. I love you. Clark. He hung up, handed the phone back. Around him, Petrov's empire was being catalogued, photographed, dismantled. But Clark couldn't shake the feeling that they were all just rearranging furniture on the Titanic. One more thing, Sarah said as they prepared to leave. Megan's asking for you. Says she has information about the Morrison Center project that could save lives. She's lying. Probably. But are you willing to bet on it? Clark looked at David, who shrugged painfully. They both knew the answer. In this game of lies built on lies, even truth became currency. Take me to her, Clark said. As they left the warehouse, he took one last look at Viktor Petrov's body. The king was dead, but the kingdom remained. And somewhere in Manhattan, the real players were already moving their pieces, adapting to this new board. The game, Clark realized with cold certainty, was far from over. Chapter 7. Unlikely Alliance. The federal holding facility in Lower Manhattan felt like a cross between a hospital and a bunker. Sarah Volkov Clark still couldn't think of her as Jessica led him through multiple security checkpoints, each scanner and metal detector another layer between the outside world and the people who'd tried to destroy it from within. 15 minutes, Sarah said as they reached the interview room. That's all I could authorize. Through the reinforced glass, Clark saw her. Megan sat in orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair now lank and unwashed. Without makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable. More like the woman he'd fallen in love with at that gallery opening 5 years ago. "You sure about this?" Sarah asked. "No." Clark stepped toward the door. "But I'm doing it anyway." The room smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. Megan looked up as he entered, and for a moment, neither spoke. The last time they'd been face to face, she'd been in designer white, and he'd been destroying her life. Now they sat across a bolted-down metal table, separated by more than just furniture. "You look terrible," she said finally. "Murder and kidnapping will do that." Clark kept his voice neutral. "You said you had information." "Clark." She reached for him, but the chain connecting her handcuffs to the table stopped her short. "I'm sorry. I know it means nothing, but you're right. It means nothing." He leaned back, studying her. "What do you know about the Morrison Center?" Megan's shoulders slumped. "Everything. Miles had me photograph all your blueprints, your notes, your calculations. But Clark, they changed things. The modifications they made." She met his eyes. "The building's designed to collapse." "What?" "Not immediately, not obviously. But there are structural weaknesses built into the plans they're using. In maybe 5 years, 10 at most, metal fatigue will cause a catastrophic failure." Her voice dropped. "It's meant to look like your design flaw. Destroy your reputation posthumously while collecting massive insurance." Clark's architect mind raced through the implications. The Morrison Center was planned as a 60-story mixed-use building. Thousands of people would work there, live there. Why would they? Because you were supposed to be dead by then. Megan's words hung between them like a physical presence. The plan was, I'd inherit everything, including liability. When the building failed, I'd take the fall as the grieving widow who couldn't handle your company. Meanwhile, they'd have already sold off the valuable assets. They were going to kill me? Eventually, maybe a car accident, maybe suicide from the stress of our divorce. Miles had options. Tears tracked down her cheeks, and Clark couldn't tell if they were genuine. With her, he might never know. "Why tell me now?" "Because I'm dead anyway." She laughed, bitter and broken. "You think Petrov's people won't reach me in here? I've got maybe a week before someone shanks me in the shower or I mysteriously hang myself like Miles." "Miles didn't." "Of course he didn't. His father had him killed the moment he became a liability." Megan leaned forward. "Clark, I know you hate me. You should. But those blueprints are already filed with the city. Construction starts in 6 months. All those people." Clark closed his eyes, seeing the building in his mind. His masterpiece, corrupted into a weapon. Where are the modified plans? Miles kept copies in a safety deposit box. Chase Manhattan, branch on 42nd Avenue. She pulled out a small key taped behind her jumpsuit's collar, sliding it across the table. "I was supposed to clean it out after everything." This could be another lie. It could. She met his gaze steadily. "But you're going to check anyway. Because you're still you. Still the man who has to fix things, build things, save things. It's why I fell in love with you." "Don't." The word came out harsher than intended. "You don't get to say that." "I know." Megan's voice broke. "But it was real, Clark. Before Miles got his hooks in me, before the money and the lies, what we had was real. That night at the gallery talking about Rothko until 3 a.m., the weekend in Vermont where we got snowed in, the way you held me when my fake grandmother died, who was actually real, by the way. She was the only family I had left, and I couldn't even tell you her real name." Clark pocketed the key, standing to leave. "Wait." Megan's desperation filled the room. "There's something else. About Emma." He froze. "Who's Emma?" "My daughter. My real daughter." The words tumbled out. "She's 5. Lives with my cousin in New Jersey. Miles never knew about her. I kept her hidden to protect her. But if something happens to me..." "You want me to what? Adopt the child of the woman who betrayed me?" "I want you to make sure she's safe." Megan's tears were definitely real now. "She's innocent in all this. Her birth certificate lists the father as unknown, but I have documents. Trust fund information. Everything's in the safety deposit box." Clark turned back, studying her. Why should I believe any of this? Because I'm giving you the power to destroy me completely. She gestured weakly at herself. What's left to destroy anyway, but Emma? She could have a chance. A real life. The kind I threw away. The door opened. Sarah stood there, tapping her watch. Please, Megan whispered. She has my eyes, but everything else. She's nothing like me. She builds things. Legos, blocks, anything she can stack. Last time I saw her, she'd made this whole city out of cardboard boxes. Said she was going to be an architect like the man in Mommy's pictures. Clark felt something crack inside his chest. She knows about me. I told her fairy tales about a prince who built castles in the sky. Stupid, right? Telling my daughter bedtime stories about the man I was planning to rob. Megan laughed through her tears. She deserves better than my legacy. Better than being the daughter of a con artist who died in federal prison. Time, Sarah said firmly. Clark moved toward the door, then stopped. The cousin's name. Address. Hope flickered in Megan's eyes as she gave the information. Her name's Emma, too. Emma Rose. I named her after my grandmother. Clark's voice was flat. Yeah, I figured. He left without looking back, following Sarah through the maze of security. His mind churned with new information, each revelation reshaping his understanding of the past 5 years. Well? Sarah asked once they were outside. Believe her? About the building? Yes. She's too specific about details for it to be improvised. Clark pulled out the key. I need to get to that bank. Not alone, you don't. Sarah pulled out her phone, arranging backup. If she's telling the truth, those documents are evidence in multiple felonies, and if she's lying, then it's a trap, Clark finished. Either way, I have to know. What about the kid? Clark didn't answer immediately. Somewhere in New Jersey, a 5-year-old girl was building cities out of cardboard, dreaming of castles in the sky, innocent of her mother's crimes, ignorant of the violence surrounding her existence. One thing at a time, he said finally. Sarah nodded, leading him to a waiting SUV. For what it's worth, I think she was telling the truth. About loving you, I mean. Makes her betrayal worse. Not better, but nothing. Love without honesty is just manipulation with better marketing. They drove through Manhattan in silence, the city flowing past like a river of glass and steel. Every building they passed made Clark think of the Morrison Center, of his corrupted masterpiece waiting to kill thousands in the name of profit. After we get the documents, he said suddenly, I want to see David. Check on his injuries. Already arranged. He's at Mount Sinai, under guard. Sarah glanced at him. You know this isn't over, right? Even with Petrov dead, his organization will want revenge. And whoever's really behind this, I know. Clark watched his city blur past. But I'm done running, done reacting. Time to start building again. Building what? He thought of Emma Rose in New Jersey, of David in a hospital bed, of Faith in protective custody, of all the lives shattered by one weekend's revelations. A case, he said, brick by brick, document by document, until everyone involved in this pays for what they've done. Sarah smiled grimly. Now you're talking like a federal witness. No. Clark's voice carried the certainty of a man who'd found his foundation again. I'm talking like an architect, and I just figured out how to build something they can't knock down. The SUV pulled up to Chase Manhattan. Somewhere inside, a safety deposit box waited with either salvation or damnation. But Clark Morrison, architect of dreams and survivor of nightmares, was ready for either. Time to see what Megan's last gift really contained. Chapter 8. Night of Reckoning. The safety deposit box contained everything Megan promised and more. Clark spread the documents across the hotel room table. The FBI had moved him to a secure location after 3 attempts on his life in as many days. Sarah sat across from him, cataloging each piece of evidence with methodical precision. Jesus, she breathed, holding up a photograph. This is Congressman Walsh, and Judge Martinez, and is that the deputy mayor? Clark didn't look up from the blueprints he was studying. His trained eye caught every deviation from his original design's subtle weaknesses hidden in load-bearing calculations. Materials specifications changed to cheaper alternatives. Safety redundancies removed. It was sabotage disguised as cost-cutting, murder plotted in architectural terms. She wasn't lying, he said quietly. This building will kill people. His phone, a burner Sarah had provided, buzzed. The text was short. They have faith. Trade. You for her. Midnight. Brooklyn Bridge. Come alone or she dies. Clark showed it to Sarah, who immediately started making calls. No, he said, standing. I'm going. Like hell you are. It's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap. But they still have my sister. Clark pulled on his jacket. Besides, don't you need someone to draw them out? Sarah's eyes narrowed. You're not a field agent, Clark. You're an architect. Exactly. He pocketed a small recording device. And I just figured out the blueprint. Petrov's dead. Miles is dead. But someone's still pulling strings. Someone who needs me dead before those building plans get exposed. Who? Clark pulled out one document from Emma's trust fund papers, a single signature on a bank form, authorizing the account's creation 5 years ago. Recognize the name? Sarah's face went pale. Thomas Wu, your lawyer. My lawyer, my friend. The man who helped me freeze my assets, who's been handling my protection. Clark laughed bitterly. He's been playing every side. Probably has been from the beginning. We need to arrest him. With what evidence? One signature? A theory? Clark shook his head. No, we need him to confess, and the only way that happens is if he thinks I'm already dead. Sarah stood, pacing. You're talking about using yourself as bait. I'm talking about ending this. Clark checked his watch. 3 hours until midnight. Look, they grab me at the bridge. You follow. When they take me to wherever they're holding Faith, they'll kill you the moment you show up. No, Thomas is too careful. He'll want to know what I've found, who I've told. He needs to control the narrative. Clark pulled up the Morrison Center plans. Besides, I have something he wants. What? The real blueprints. My originals before his modifications. Clark smiled grimly. The ones that proved the sabotage was added after my design was complete. He needs those destroyed to sell his version of events. Sarah studied him for a long moment. You've thought this through. I'm an architect. I think everything through. What about Emma? Megan's daughter. Clark's expression softened slightly. If I don't make it, she's got a trust fund and a cousin who loves her. If I do... He shrugged. One problem at a time. Sarah made more calls, arranging surveillance, backup, contingencies. Clark barely listened, his mind already at the bridge, calculating angles and distances. Architecture wasn't just about building, it was about understanding space, predicting how people moved through it, where they'd position themselves. At 11:45 p.m., Clark stood at the Brooklyn Bridge's pedestrian entrance. The October wind cut through his jacket, carrying the smell of the East River and exhaust fumes. The city sparkled around him, millions of lights and windows he'd helped design, ignorant of the drama playing out in their shadows. A black town car pulled up. The window rolled down, revealing Thomas W.'s familiar face, now twisted with regret and greed. Clark, I'm sorry it came to this. Are you? Clark stepped toward the car. Or are you sorry you got caught? Get in. We'll discuss this somewhere more private. Where's Faith? Safe, for now. Thomas gestured impatiently. Don't make this harder than necessary. Clark slid into the back seat. 2 men flanked him immediately, professionals by their bearing. Former military, maybe. Definitely killers. I trusted you, Clark said as the car pulled away. 5 years. You knew everything. Which is why this pains me. Thomas turned from the front seat. You were supposed to be a simple mark. Marry Megan, transfer assets, tragic accident, clean and profitable. But you had to be noble, had to investigate. How long have you been working with Petrov? Petrov? Thomas laughed. Clark, you still don't understand. Petrov worked for me, well, for my employers, as did Miles ultimately, though neither knew it. The car headed into Brooklyn, past warehouses and industrial sites. Clark memorized the route, noting landmarks, calculating distances. The Morrison Center, he said. Why sabotage it? Insurance primarily, but also precedent. When it fails, new building codes will pass. Codes that favor my employer's construction companies. It's not just about money, Clark. It's about controlling how this city grows. Through murder? Through progress. Thomas's voice carried the conviction of a true believer. Every skyscraper stands on someone's bones. We're just more honest about it. The car stopped at a warehouse near the Navy Yard, different from Petrov's newer, cleaner. Corporate evil rather than old-school thuggery. Inside, Faith sat tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes widened when she saw Clark, tears streaming down her face. "Let her go," Clark said. "You have me. She's not part of this." Actually, she is. Thomas pulled out a gun, Clark's own Glock, he realized, taken from his apartment safe. "See, the story needs tragedy. Architect goes crazy after wedding betrayal. Kills sister in psychotic break, then himself. Very sad. Very believable. Sarah knows where I am." "Agent Volkov?" "Yes, we're counting on that." Thomas smiled. "She'll arrive just in time to find the bodies. Corrupt DEA agent working with criminals, silencing witnesses. Her protests of innocence won't mean much when we leak her real identity. Did you know she's Petrov's actual niece? Family business? All the way down." Clark felt the world tilt. "She's been playing me too?" "Everyone's been playing you, Clark. That's what you never understood. You think in straight lines, solid foundations. The real world is all curves and compromises." One of the guards cut Faith's bonds, hauling her to her feet. She stumbled, weak from captivity. "Kill him first," Thomas instructed. "Make her watch. Then her. I'll handle the scene." Clark moved without thinking. Architect's spatial awareness combined with desperate rage. He grabbed the nearest guard's wrist, twisting until the gun dropped. A shot went wild, shattering overhead lights. In the sudden darkness, muscle memory took over those boxing lessons from college, the self-defense courses Faith had dragged him to. Another shot, muzzle flash illuminating Thomas's shocked face, Faith screaming through the tape, bodies colliding in the dark, then light blazing, brilliant. FBI agents poured through every entrance, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Not Sarah's team, different jackets, different voices. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" Clark found himself on the ground, Faith somehow in his arms. She was sobbing, alive, whole. Around them, Thomas and his men were being cuffed, rights being read. A familiar figure approached not Sarah, but Robert Mitchell, the private investigator. "Sorry for the deception," Robert said, helping them stand. "Agent Mitchell, FBI Internal Affairs. We've been investigating corruption in the DEA for 3 years. Your wedding just accelerated our timeline." "Sarah?" "In custody. Has been since you left the hotel. We intercepted your communications, knew about the meet." Robert's expression was sympathetic. "I know this is a lot to process." "Understatement," Clark muttered, still holding Faith. "But your instincts were right. Thomas Wu was the nexus. Petrov, Miles, even Megan, they were all tools. Wu connected dirty money to legitimate construction, turning the New York skyline into a money laundering operation." "The Morrison Center?" "Will be built to your original specifications. The modified plans are evidence now." Robert gestured to the warehouse around them. "As is all of this. Wu thought he was recording your murder. Instead, he recorded his confession." Clark pulled the tape from Faith's mouth, and she immediately punched him in the shoulder. "Ow! What? That's for scaring me to death." She hugged him fiercely. "Also for saving my life. God, Clark, when they grabbed me." "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Mr. Morrison," another agent approached. "We'll need statements from both of you. But first." He handed Clark a phone. "Someone wants to speak with you." The video call connected to Megan. She was in a different facility witness protection, by the looks of it. Her face was tear-streaked but alive. "They told me what you did," she said. "Thank you for stopping it, for saving all those people." Clark didn't know what to say. Too much had happened, too many revelations and betrayals. "Emma's safe," Megan continued. "My cousin. They're protecting them both. Clark, I know I have no right to ask, but I'll make sure she's okay," he heard himself say. "Whatever happens, she'll be provided for." "That's not, I mean, yes, but—" Megan took a breath. "Will you tell her about me? The truth? When she's older?" Clark looked at Faith, who nodded slightly. Family was family, even the broken kind. "When she's ready," he promised. I'll tell her you loved her enough to keep her safe." Megan sobbed, nodding, and the call ended. "So what now?" Faith asked as medics checked them over. Clark looked around the warehouse. In a few hours, dawn would break over New York. The city would wake to new headlines, new scandals. But somewhere in New Jersey, a little girl would also wake, still dreaming of castles in the sky. Now? Clark pulled his sister close. Now we rebuild. Properly this time. Your company? Your reputation? Everything. He managed a tired smile. I'm an architect, remember? I know how to build on ruins. As they were led from the warehouse, Clark took one last look at the scene. Thomas Wu sat in custody. His empire of lies collapsed. The real blueprints were safe. The killing building would never rise. It wasn't justice, exactly. Too many people were dead, too many lives destroyed. But it was a foundation, something to build on. And for an architect, that was enough to start. Chapter 9. The Broken Pieces. April rain hammered against the windows of Clark's new apartment in Brooklyn Heights, each drop a tiny fist pounding on glass. 6 months had passed since the warehouse, since Thomas W.'s arrest, since the night that rewrote every truth Clark thought he knew. The apartment was smaller than his old place, deliberately so less space meant fewer shadows where memories could hide. "Emma, breakfast is ready," Clark called, his voice still rough with sleep. The nightmares came less frequently now, but they still came. Gunshots in the dark, Megan's face behind prison glass, the architectural blueprints of a building designed to kill. Small feet padded across hardwood floors, and Emma Rose appeared in the doorway, clutching a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. Her dark hair fell in uncombed tangles around a face that was heartbreakingly familiar. Megan's eyes, yes, but also something else, a wariness that no 5-year-old should possess. "I'm not hungry," she said, the words barely above a whisper. Clark knelt to her level, the movement sending a twinge through his left shoulder, a souvenir from that night at the warehouse. "How about just some juice? Orange, the way you like it?" Emma considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence. In the 2 weeks since she'd come to live with him, every interaction felt like negotiating a peace treaty with a tiny, grief-stricken nation. "Okay," she finally agreed, "but Mr. Elephant wants apple juice. Mr. Elephant has excellent taste." Faith emerged from the guest room, already dressed for her shift at the hospital. She'd put her residency on hold to help Clark, moving in without being asked, the way family does when the world falls apart. "Morning, sunshine," Faith said to Emma, who managed a small smile. To Clark, she added, "Dr. Catherine called. Your appointment's at 10. Clark nodded, pouring juice into Emma's favorite cup plastic covered in cartoon buildings. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Can you—" "Already handled. I'll take Emma to school, pick her up after. Michael's coming by around noon to go over the insurance paperwork." The insurance companies were still fighting Clark's claims about the wedding disaster. Apparently, bride arrested for fraud wasn't covered under standard event insurance. Who knew? Emma climbed onto a kitchen stool, swinging her legs. "Is Uncle Michael bringing his dog?" "Probably," Clark said, grateful for any topic that made her eyes light up. "You know how Cooper goes everywhere with him now." "Cooper's nice. He doesn't ask questions." The words hit Clark like a physical blow. In 2 weeks, Emma had endured questions from social workers, psychologists, lawyers, and well-meaning relatives. Everyone wanted to know how she felt, what she remembered, whether she understood that Mommy wasn't coming back. "You know what?" Clark said suddenly. "How about we get a dog?" Emma's eyes widened, the first genuine surprise he'd seen from her. "Really?" "Really. We can go to the shelter this weekend, see if any dogs need a home." "Like me," Emma said quietly. "I needed a home." Faith caught Clark's eye, her expression a mix of sympathy and warning. The therapist had cautioned against making big decisions too quickly, but Clark was tired of caution. Caution hadn't protected anyone. The doorbell rang too early for visitors. Clark checked the security monitor, a habit now, and saw a woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, holding an umbrella against the rain. "Who is it?" Faith asked. "I don't know." But something about the woman's posture, the way she held herself, seemed familiar. Clark opened the door cautiously. The woman's face was lined but dignified. Her eyes, God, her eyes were Megan's. Or rather, Megan's had been hers. "Mr. Morrison? I'm Patricia Walsh, Megan's mother, her real mother." The words hung in the air like architectural plans, waiting to be built into meaning. Behind him, Clark heard Faith's sharp intake of breath. "I thought the parents at the wedding." "Actors," Patricia said simply. "Part of her cover. But I'm real. And I'm here about Emma." Clark's protective instincts flared. "If you're here to take her—" "No." Patricia held up a hand. "I'm here to thank you. And to give you something Megan left. The real Megan. My daughter, before she became what she became." Clark glanced back at Emma, who was watching with those took-knowing eyes. "Faith, could you—" "Emma and I were just discussing which umbrella goes best with rain boots," Faith said smoothly, ushering the child toward her room. "Very important fashion decisions." Once they were alone, Clark gestured Patricia inside. She moved carefully, as if the weight of her secrets might shatter the floor. "Coffee?" he offered, needing something to do with his hands. "Please." As the machine gurgled to life, Patricia studied the apartment. Her gaze lingered on Emma's drawings stuck to the refrigerator wonky buildings under smiling suns, stick figures holding hands. "She's artistic," Patricia observed, "like her mother was before." "Before what?" Patricia accepted the coffee mug, wrapping weathered hands around its warmth. "Before Connor died, Megan's father, Emma's named after him, Emma Rose was his mother's name." Clark sat across from her, the kitchen island between them like a negotiation table. "How much do you know?" "Everything. The trials, the testimony, the witness protection." Patricia's voice carried the weight of a mother's grief. "They tell me she's safe, that she's cooperating. They won't tell me where." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Patricia studied him with eyes that had seen too much. "You have every right to hate her." "Hate's too simple," Clark admitted. "It's more like grief for the person I thought she was." Patricia reached into her purse, pulling out a manila envelope. "This might complicate that grief." Inside were photographs, documents, letters. Clark spread them across the counter, his architect's eye cataloging details. Young Megan at a piano recital, a scholarship letter to Juilliard, medical bills that ran into 6 figures. "Connor had cancer," Patricia explained. "Experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Megan was 19, brilliant, full of promise. She dropped out to help pay bills, started cocktail waitressing. That's where she met her first mark." "You're trying to justify—" "I'm trying to explain." Patricia's voice sharpened. "Not excuse, not forgive. But you're raising her daughter now. You should know who she really was." A photo caught Clark's eye, Megan, maybe 22, holding an infant. The love on her face was devastating in its authenticity. "She tried to go straight after Emma was born," Patricia continued. "Got a real job, real apartment. But the people she'd worked with, they don't let you just walk away. They threatened Emma. So Megan made a deal, one last job, you—" "One last job," Clark repeated bitterly. "How cinematic." "She fell in love with you." Patricia said it simply, like stating architectural facts. "Called me crying about it. Said you were everything she'd wanted Connor to live to become. Kind, brilliant, building things instead of tearing them down. But she went through with it anyway. Because they had her daughter." Patricia's voice broke. "Mr. Morrison, I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to understand that the woman you loved, she existed. She just existed alongside the woman who betrayed you." Clark stood abruptly, needing distance from these revelations. Through the window, Brooklyn sprawled under gray skies, millions of people living their complicated lives in boxes stacked toward heaven. "Why tell me this?" he asked. Patricia joined him at the window. "Because Emma's going to ask questions about her mother, about you, about how she came to be here. And you're going to have to decide which story to tell." "The truth." "Which truth?" Patricia turned to face him. "The one where her mother was a con artist who died betraying everyone? Or the one where her mother loved her enough to die trying to save strangers from a collapsing building?" "Both," Clark said after a moment. "When she's old enough, I'll tell her both." Patricia smiled sadly. You're a better man than my daughter deserved. No, Clark said, thinking of Emma in the next room, building worlds from blocks and dreams. I'm just trying to be the man her daughter deserves. Patricia set down her coffee cup, preparing to leave. There's one more thing. Megan had a safety deposit box even I didn't know about. She left instructions that if anything happened to her, you should have this. She handed him a small key, different from the one that had led to evidence and arrests. This one was older, worn smooth by handling. What's in it? I don't know. But knowing my daughter, it's either an apology or an escape plan. Patricia moved toward the door. Maybe both. After she left, Clark stood in his kitchen holding a key to another of Megan's secrets. Outside, the rain was lessening, sun trying to break through clouds. From Emma's room came the sound of Faith's voice, reading a story about princesses who built their own castles. He thought about the woman in witness protection, somewhere in America with a new name and old regrets. About the daughter in the next room, who would grow up with questions he was only beginning to know how to answer. About the buildings he'd design and the home he was trying to build from broken pieces. The key sat cold in his palm, another choice to make. But first, there was breakfast to finish, a therapy appointment to keep, a little girl to raise. The rest could wait. After all, Clark Morrison was an architect. He knew that the strongest structures were built slowly, one carefully placed piece at a time. Chapter 10. Wounds Healing. Slowly. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a Manhattan high-rise, all glass and steel and carefully cultivated intimidation. Clark sat in the conference room, Emma's custody papers spread before him like architectural blueprints for a life he was still learning to build. Mr. O'Brien is contesting the adoption, his new lawyer, Janet Brennan, said with the kind of calm that preceded storms. Claims he has rights as Megan's next of kin. David? Clark couldn't hide his surprise. Last I heard, he was in physical therapy, grateful to be alive. Apparently, gratitude has a shelf life. Janet slid a document across the mahogany table. He's asking for full custody and control of Emma's trust fund. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched out like a promise or a threat, depending on your perspective. Clark had designed 3 of the buildings visible from here, back when his biggest concern was sustainable materials and city permits. He can't be serious. He barely knows Emma. Money makes people serious about all sorts of things they previously ignored. Janet's expression suggested she'd seen every variety of human greed. The good news is we have Megan's video testimony. The bad news is they have a blood relative argument. Clark's phone buzzed. Faith, texting from the hospital. Emma's teacher called. There's been an incident. I need to go, Clark said, already standing. We're due in court in 3 days, Janet warned. This conversation isn't over. But Clark was already moving. Architectural precision replaced by parental panic. 20 minutes later, he was sitting in a kindergarten classroom that smelled of crayons and childhood, facing Emma's teacher, Miss Grace Palmer. She's not hurt, Grace said immediately, recognizing the fear in his eyes. But there was an altercation with another student. Emma hit someone? Clark couldn't reconcile that with the quiet girl who whispered to stuffed elephants. Not exactly. Grace gestured to a corner where Emma sat at a tiny table, methodically building something with blocks. Another child said something about her mother, about what happened. Emma didn't hit him, but she did build what she called a jail around his desk with all the classroom blocks. Told him that's where people who tell lies have to stay. Despite the situation, Clark felt a flicker of pride, an architectural solution to an emotional problem. What did the other kid say? Grace's expression softened. That Emma's mom was a criminal who tried to steal money. Children hear things from their parents, repeat them without understanding. But it's true, Clark said quietly. Truth isn't always age-appropriate, Mr. Morrison. Grace moved closer, lowering her voice. Emma's processing trauma in the only way she knows how, by building walls. Literally. Clark watched Emma add another block to whatever she was constructing. Her concentration was absolute, the same focus he brought to blueprints and building codes. What do you suggest? Therapy's helping, but she needs normality too. Routine, friends, a chance to just be a kid. Grace hesitated, then added, "There's a school event next weekend. Spring carnival. Maybe attending with a parental figure who isn't going anywhere would help." "Of course I'll come." "Good." Grace smiled, and Clark noticed she had paint under her fingernails, glitter in her hair, battle scars from teaching 5-year-olds. "For what it's worth, Mr. Morrison, Emma talks about you constantly. How you're teaching her to draw buildings. How you make the best grilled cheese. How you promised her a dog." "Still working on the dog. My sister's allergic and she's staying with us. No rush. Promises kept slowly are still promises kept." Grace stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'll talk to the other child's parents. Make sure they understand that gossip has consequences." Clark approached Emma, crouching beside her table. "Hey, architect, what are we building?" Emma looked up, those Megan eyes serious in her small face. "A house, but it has special walls." "What makes them special?" "They only let good people in." She placed another block carefully. "Bad people bounce off. That's a good design feature." "Miss Grace says I have to say sorry to Kevin." Emma's voice suggested she'd rather eat vegetables for a year. "Do you feel sorry?" Emma considered this. "I feel sorry his parents tell him mean things about my mommy." "That's a kind of sorry," Clark agreed. "Sometimes people say mean things because they're scared or confused." "Were you scared of mommy?" The question landed like a structural beam dropped from height. Clark sat on the tiny chair beside her, ignoring how his knees protested. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Not of her, exactly, but of how she made me feel." "How did she make you feel?" "Like I could build anything. Like the world made sense." He helped Emma place another block. "And then later, like everything I built might fall down." "But it didn't fall down," Emma pointed out with 5-year-old logic. "You're still here. I'm here. Aunt Faith is here." "You're right." Clark felt his throat tighten. "We're still here." "So maybe we build better now," Emma said, adding a roof to her structure, "with the special walls that keep bad things out." Later, after apologies were made and hands were washed, Clark and Emma walked through Central Park. Spring was tentatively touching New York, coaxing green from winter bare branches. Emma's hand in his was small but steady, trusting him to navigate the paths. "Mr. Morrison?" Grace Palmer appeared beside them, slightly out of breath. "Sorry, I was hoping to catch you. I wanted to give you this." She handed him a flyer for an art therapy program. "It's specifically for children dealing with loss. Combines building projects with emotional processing. I thought Emma might benefit." "Thank you." Clark pocketed the flyer, noting the program was in the same building as one of his current projects. "Are you heading this way?" "Actually, yes. I live just off 79th. They fell into step together, Emma between them, chattering about the dog she'd seen. Grace listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that made Emma beam. "You're good with her," Clark observed. "Occupational requirement. Though Emma makes it easy, she's remarkably resilient." "Gets that from her mother," Clark said without thinking, then froze. Grace touched his arm lightly. "It's okay to acknowledge the good parts. People are rarely all one thing." They reached the park exit. Emma had run ahead to pet someone's golden retriever, her laughter carrying back on the spring breeze. "The carnival," Grace said suddenly. "If you need help managing booths or activities, I'll be there. Extra hands, friendly face, whatever helps Emma feel secure." "I appreciate that." Clark watched Emma demonstrate her block-building technique to the bemused dog owner. "She doesn't trust easily anymore." "Neither do you, I'm guessing." Clark looked at Grace, really looked at her. Paint under fingernails, yes, but also laugh lines around warm brown eyes. Someone who spent her days building futures for other people's children. "Work in progress," he admitted. "The best structures usually are." Grace smiled. "See you at school, Mr. Morrison." "Emma, don't forget we're painting tomorrow." As she walked away, Emma returned, face bright with dog-induced joy. "I like Miss Grace," she announced. "She understands about building things." "Yeah," Clark agreed, watching Grace disappear into the city crowd. "She does." That evening, while Emma slept and Faith worked a night shift, Clark sat at his drafting table. But instead of client projects, He found himself sketching something else, a house with special walls, windows that let in light but kept out darkness, rooms that could grow as their inhabitants did. It wasn't a blueprint yet, just possibilities on paper. But for the first time in 6 months, Clark Morrison was designing something that wasn't just structurally sound. He was designing a future. Chapter 11. New Dawn. 2 years dissolved like morning frost under spring sun. The courtroom that had once held custody battles now hosted a different kind of proceeding. Clark adjusted Emma's hair bow pink because she'd entered what Faith called the pink phase and tried to calm his racing heart. "You may approach," Judge Catherine Williams said, her voice warm despite the formal setting. Emma, now 7 and no longer the silent girl clutching stuffed elephants, practically bounced to the bench. She wore her best dress, the one with tiny buildings printed along the hem, a gift from Grace for her birthday. "Miss Morrison," the judge said, and Clark felt his chest tighten at the name. "Do you understand what we're doing today?" "Yes, Your Honor," Emma said with careful pronunciation. "Today you make it official that Clark is my daddy. But he's already been my daddy for 2 years, so really we're just doing paperwork." Muffled laughter rippled through the gallery. Faith wiped her eyes, Michael grinned, and Grace squeezed Clark's hand. Even David, sitting in the back row, managed a small smile. His custody challenge had evaporated after a heart attack made him reconsider priorities. These days, he settled for being Uncle David who visited monthly and had finally gotten sober. "That's exactly right," Judge Williams agreed. "Mr. Morrison, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Clark stood, Emma's hand finding his automatically. 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My fiancée, my trust in people, my sense of how the world worked. But Emma taught me something I never learned in architecture school. Sometimes the best things we build come from broken pieces. He looked down at Emma, who beamed up at him with Megan's eyes but her own spirit. "I promise to be your father in all the ways that matter, to help you build blanket forts and dreams, to check for monsters and teach you they're not as scary as they seem, to love you on your worst days and celebrate your best ones, to make sure you always know that you were chosen, wanted, and loved beyond measure." "I love you too, Daddy," Emma said simply, and the courtroom collectively melted. "Well then," Judge Williams said, signing the papers with a flourish, "by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Congratulations to the Morrison family." The celebration spilled out of the courthouse into Central Park, where Grace had organized a surprise party. Emma shrieked with delight at the sight of her classmates, her teacher having somehow corralled 27-year-olds and their parents into keeping a secret. "You did this?" Clark asked Grace, watching Emma race toward the bounce house they'd rented. "We did this," Grace corrected, gesturing to Faith and Michael, who were setting up a cake table. "Turns out planning a wedding gives you transferable party skills." The mention of weddings hung between them for a moment. They'd been dating for 6 months, taking things slowly, building carefully. Emma had been the one to push them together, announcing at dinner one night that Miss Grace should probably just live here since she's here all the time anyway. "Speaking of weddings," Clark said, then stopped. "Sorry, that was clumsy?" Grace laughed. "Very, but also interesting. Were you planning to propose at our daughter's adoption party?" "Our daughter?" Clark's voice caught. Grace's face flushed. "I mean, your daughter, Emma. I didn't mean to—" "No," Clark caught her hand. "You meant it, and you're right. You've been her mother in every way that matters for over a year." "Clark, I wasn't going to propose today," he admitted. "But I've been carrying this around for a month, waiting for the right moment." He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that was elegant in its simplicity, a single diamond surrounded by smaller stones arranged like a constellation. "It reminded me of how you teach," Clark explained. "One bright center with all these little lights around it, creating something bigger than the sum of its parts." "Are you proposing with architectural metaphors?" Grace was crying and laughing simultaneously. "Is it working?" Instead of answering, she kissed him. Somewhere nearby, Faith whooped, and Michael started a slow clap that spread through the party. Emma came running, pink tulle dress grass-stained, face painted like a butterfly. "Are you getting married?" she demanded. "If Grace says yes," Clark managed. "Grace, say yes," Emma commanded. "We already picked out your dress." "We?" Grace looked between them. "Daddy's not good at girl stuff," Emma explained seriously. "So Aunt Faith and I helped." "In that case," Grace knelt to Emma's level, "how could I say no?" The party became an impromptu engagement celebration. As the sun set over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Clark found himself on a bench, watching Emma teach other kids her special building technique with blocks someone had brought. "You good?" Michael sat beside him, Cooper the golden retriever flopping at their feet. "Yeah," Clark said, surprised to find it was true. "I'm good." "Hell of a journey from that plaza bathroom, huh?" "Different lifetime." Clark accepted the beer Michael offered. "Sometimes I can barely remember who that guy was." "Sure you can. He's still in there, the guy who builds things to last. Just builds different things now." David approached hesitantly. "Clark, could we talk?" Michael made to leave, but Clark waved him to stay. "What's on your mind, David?" "I wanted to apologize. Again. For the custody thing. For not telling you about Megan sooner. For—" David sat heavily. "For all of it. You've apologized. I've forgiven. We're good." "Are we?" David watched Emma playing. "I see her with you, how happy she is, and I think about how different it could have been. If Megan had just—" "Don't," Clark said gently. "That way lies madness. Trust me, I've been down that road." "Do you ever hear from her?" Clark shook his head. Megan remained in witness protection, her testimony having brought down what remained of WU's organization. He received updates through federal marshals. She was alive. She was safe. She was staying sober. It was more than some people got. "I think about writing to Emma," David continued, "for when she's older, about the Megan I knew before everything went wrong. The sister who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up all night when I had nightmares." "Write it," Clark encouraged. "She'll want those stories someday." As if summoned by her name, Emma appeared, dragging Grace by the hand. "Daddy, Grace says we can get married at the place where you and Mommy were supposed to get married. Is that weird?" The adults exchanged glances over her head. Trust Emma to voice what everyone was thinking. "What do you think?" Clark asked her. Emma considered this with her trademark seriousness. "I think Mommy would want us to be happy. And that place is pretty. We could make new memories that are good instead of sad." "Out of the mouths of babes," Grace murmured. "But no big party," Emma continued. "Just family, and my whole class, and maybe Cooper, and that nice judge lady. So a small wedding of about 50 people?" Clark laughed. "Exactly," Emma beamed. "I'm glad you understand." As the party wound down and guests began leaving, Clark found himself back at the building blocks with Emma. She was constructing something elaborate, tongue poking out in concentration. "What's this one?" he asked. "Our house," she said. "See? There's your office where you draw buildings. There's Grace's room for all her art supplies. There's Aunt Faith's room for when she visits. There's a yard for our dog. We don't have a dog." "Yet," Emma corrected. "And there's my room, and the baby's room." "Baby?" Clark and Grace said simultaneously. Emma looked up innocently. "For later. Buildings should plan for expansion, right, Daddy?" Grace laughed so hard she nearly spilled her champagne. "She's got you there, architect." As they packed up, the sun long set and stars attempting to shine through New York's light pollution, Clark carried a sleeping Emma to the car. She mumbled something against his shoulder, words lost but tone content. "Thank you," Grace said softly, walking beside him. "For what?" "For letting me in, both of you. I know how hard that was after everything." Clark shifted Emma's weight, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You made it easy. You saw us at our broken worst and stayed anyway." "I saw you at your rebuilding best," Grace corrected. "That's the Clark and Emma I fell in love with. The ones who make beautiful things from difficult circumstances." They reached the car, settling Emma into her booster seat. As Clark buckled her in, she stirred slightly. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Today was the best day." "It really was." "Tomorrow will be good too," she murmured, already drifting back to sleep. We're building tomorrow, too. Clark closed the car door gently, turning to find Grace watching him with soft eyes. She's right, you know, Grace said, about building tomorrow. Yeah, Clark agreed, pulling her close. One day at a time, one block at a time. As they drove home through the glittering city, Emma sleeping peacefully in the back, Grace's hand in his, Clark marveled at the architecture of their improvised family. Not what he'd planned, nothing like the blueprints he'd drawn for his life 3 years ago, but stronger for being tested, beautiful for being chosen, perfect in its imperfection. Chapter 12, Legacy of Love. 5 years passed in a blur of first days of school, lost teeth, science fairs, and soccer games. The Plaza Hotel's palm court glittered with afternoon light, transformed once again for celebration. But this time the ghosts of the past seemed content to rest. "Stop fidgeting," Faith commanded, straightening Clark's boutonniere for the 3rd time. "It's a 10-year company anniversary, not an execution." "Feels like both," Clark muttered, scanning the growing crowd. Morrison Architectural Group had grown from his dining room table to 50 employees, 3 offices, and a reputation for buildings that stood against more than just weather. "Daddy!" Emma's voice carried across the room. At 10, she'd grown tall and confident, her architectural dreams evolving from blocks to actual sketches. She wore a dress she'd picked out herself, blue with silver stars, like buildings touching the sky, she'd explained. Beside her, Grace balanced their 2-year-old twins, Sophie and Sam, who were determined to explore every corner of the historic venue. Her pregnancy had been a surprise expansion planning, Emma had joked, but the twins had completed their family in ways Clark couldn't have imagined. 5 minutes to speech time, Grace said, kissing his cheek. "You've got this." "Do I?" Clark watched Sophie attempt to climb a decorative column. "What am I even supposed to say?" "The truth," Michael suggested, Cooper at his side. The golden retriever wore a bow tie for the occasion, therapy dog vest traded for party attire. "Usually works." The crowd settled as Clark took the small stage they'd set up. He saw familiar faces everywhere, clients who'd become friends, employees who'd become family, skeptics who'd become believers. In the back, David sat with his wife and new baby, sobriety and peace having brought unexpected gifts. Even Patricia Walsh had come, Megan's mother, now a regular part of Emma's life. 10 years ago, Clark began, his voice carrying across the space where everything had shattered. "I stood in this room and thought my life was over. In a way, I was right. That life, built on incomplete blueprints and false foundations, did end." He found Emma in the crowd, her face bright with encouragement. "But something I've learned in architecture and life, sometimes demolition is necessary. Sometimes you have to clear away what's broken to build something better. Something true." Grace shifted Sophie to her hip, smiling at him with the same warmth that had thawed his frozen heart all those years ago. "Morrison Architectural Group was born from necessity," Clark continued. "I needed to work, to create, to prove that I could still build despite the wreckage. But what started as survival became something more. It became about building differently, building with integrity, with purpose, with the understanding that our structures shelter dreams, not just bodies." He pulled out a letter, worn from reading. "Last week, I received this. It's from a woman who lived in one of our affordable housing projects. She wrote to tell me that for the first time in her daughter's life, they have a home that feels safe, that feels permanent, that feels like it was designed by someone who understands that buildings are more than math and materials." Clark's voice caught slightly. "She's right. Every building we design carries the DNA of our hardest lessons. They're built to last not because of superior engineering, but because we know what it costs when things fall apart." Applause rippled through the room. Clark raised a hand for silence. "But tonight isn't really about buildings. It's about the people who helped rebuild a broken architect. Faith, who moved in when I couldn't function and stayed until I could. Michael, who stood by me when standing by me meant dodging bullets literally. Grace, who saw a damaged man trying to raise a traumatized child and decided we were worth the risk." He looked directly at Emma. "And Emma, who taught me that love isn't about perfect foundations, it's about choosing to build together, even when the ground shifts beneath you. "Love you too, Daddy?" Emma called out, causing laughter to ripple through the crowd. "Which brings me to why we're really here," Clark said, pulling out another envelope. "This room has seen its share of drama, so I figured one more revelation wouldn't hurt." The crowd leaned in collectively. "As of today, Morrison Architectural Group is launching the Megan Walsh Foundation." Gasps echoed off the Palm Court's ornate ceiling. Emma's eyes widened. She knew her mother's real name, but rarely heard it spoken. "I know," Clark acknowledged. "Complicated feelings all around. But here's what I've learned. People are more than their worst moments. Megan made terrible choices, hurt people badly, mine included. But she also loved her daughter fiercely, and in her final acts, tried to prevent greater harm." He unfolded the letter. "This came through federal channels last month. Megan died 2 years ago, cancer, the same disease that started her down this path when her father got sick. But she spent her last years counseling other women caught in similar situations, helping them find legitimate paths forward." Patricia Walsh was crying quietly, David beside her with his arm around her shoulders. "The foundation will provide scholarships for children of incarcerated parents, focusing on architecture and design, because everyone deserves the chance to build something better than what they inherited." Clark stepped down from the stage as applause thundered through the room. Emma ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Is that okay?" he asked her quietly. "The foundation? I should have asked. Mom would like it," Emma said simply. "She always said you build the best things." Later, as the party wound down and the twins finally crashed in their stroller, Clark found himself on the same bench where he'd once sat in shock, trying to process betrayal. Grace sat beside him, Emma curled between them despite being too old for such things. "No regrets?" Grace asked softly. Clark looked around the Palm Court scene of his greatest humiliation transformed into a place of triumph. Thought about Megan, wherever she was buried, finally at peace. About Thomas Wu, serving 25 to life. About buildings that would never fall and families that would never break. "None," he said, meaning it. "Every broken piece led us here." Emma stirred, not quite asleep. "Daddy, tell me the story again. About the architect and the princess who built castles." "Which version?" Clark asked, though he knew. "The real one, where sometimes people make mistakes, but love fixes things." Grace smiled, settling in for a story they all knew by heart but never tired of hearing. Because that was what families did. They told their stories, honored their ghosts, and built their futures one careful block at a time. "Once upon a time," Clark began, "there was an architect who thought he knew everything about building. But he was wrong. He didn't learn the most important thing until his whole world fell down." Emma snuggled closer, safe in the knowledge that this story, however it started, always ended the same way. With love standing stronger than any structure, a family forged from unlikely pieces, and the promise that tomorrow they would build again. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the gathering dusk, millions of lights and windows telling millions of stories. But inside the Plaza Hotel, in the exact spot where one story had ended so traumatically, a better one continued to unfold. "The architect learned," Clark continued, his voice soft but sure, "that the strongest foundations aren't made of concrete or steel. They're made of choice. The choice to trust after betrayal, to love after loss, to build after everything falls down." Sophie stirred in her stroller, and Grace adjusted her blanket with practiced ease. The Palm Court staff began quietly cleaning up, but no one rushed the family on the bench. Some stories, everyone understood, needed their proper ending. "And did they live happily ever after?" Emma asked, though she knew this answer too. "They lived," Clark said, kissing the top of her head. "Happily, sadly, simply, beautifully. They lived with purpose and love, and the knowledge that every day was a chance to add another block to their castle." "That's a good ending," Emma murmured, finally succumbing to sleep. "No," Grace corrected gently, watching their daughters sleep while the city they called home sparkled beyond the windows. "That's a good beginning." And in the Palm Court of the Plaza Hotel, where betrayal had once shattered everything, a family sat surrounded by the architecture of their imperfect chosen, fiercely protected love. The ghosts were quiet. The future was bright. The building continued.